Shaun, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm on the presidential team with your good self, Kelly, as Vice President. I'm chair of the IOSH Construction Group, and I'm a director at Tetra.
Brilliant. We've just come off stage talking about the fundamentals of working at height. So which occupations are at most risk of working at height?
So quite obviously the construction industry is the biggest industry affected by falls from height. Unfortunately, a lot of the fatalities and life-changing injuries originate in that sector.
Yeah.
Perhaps surprisingly, agriculture is a close second. And I suppose one of the groups we worry a bit about is those hard-to-reach groups, those contractors maybe doing sort of routine property work, sole traders, that type of thing. They're often using ladders and sometimes working, of course, for the bigger construction companies. They seem to be particularly at risk.
And of course, there's also events, telecoms, it's pretty much anywhere, isn't it? Anywhere where working at height is happening, there's a risk of falls.
And of course, telecoms is somewhere where, as a business, Tetra have done a lot of work in their ladder system, sort of solving that issue where a ladder is the only option, but we try to make sure the ladder is secured, the person is secured to the ladder, and then offer up training to go with that. So telecoms is an interesting industry because it's an industry which has seen significant issues around falls from height, but is innovated very, very effectively in resolving those issues.
So the next question is kind of what advice would you give those industries?
So I think obviously risk assessment is everything. So but it doesn't stop with that, and it doesn't stop with procedures either. I think they need to think about that mindset that we were talking about in the session today. How do you achieve that mindset change? How do you get people to think about compliance over convenience? How do you move people from thinking about ethics, in particular focusing on ethics rather than cost, and then giving people the courage to speak up when they see things that aren't right. And I think something that you've spoken a lot about is about involving workers in decision making when it comes to work at height. So listening to them, helping to try to understand where they're coming from, and building solutions around that, but also helping them sort of feel they can speak up and tell you what's going on, so you get a real picture of whether things are being done right or wrong before they end up being a fatal accident or a life-changing injury.
I think that's entirely fair. So who is responsible when working on height?
So, obviously it's an employer's duty under the Health and Safety at Work Act. The regulations make it very clear that that duty extends to doing a risk assessment and then adopting a hierarchy of control where we think of elimination first in terms of avoiding the need for work at height, and then working through a graduation, if you like, down to less effective measures like administrative controls. But I don't think it's just the employer that is responsible. I think everyone has responsibility. People that do the work, of course, have a prime responsibility to make sure that they're using equipment and stuff that's provided from them following training. But also other people who may see what's going on. I think there's a really strong ethical responsibility there, and it's that sort of thing, don't walk by. If you see someone doing something unsafe, say something about it. And then I suppose, it's about giving people the tools to be able to have those conversations in a sort of non-threatening, non-confrontational way, which means they get a meaningful result. Nobody likes being told what to do, but it is very important actually maybe to highlight to them maybe they should be doing something in a slightly different way.
Yeah, I think it's that concept of we look after ourselves and each other.
Yeah.
So actually we are always looking out for each other and making sure that people are doing it doing something as safely as they possibly can.
Yeah, I've had conversations with scaffolders where it's pretty confrontational because they don't like being told what to do, so they sort of come back with a few choice words. Yep. But actually, I've also had really successful conversations where they put their hands up and go, "Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. Let's work on this." And you say, "You don't have to apologize. I just don't want you to get hurt, basically." And it kind of brings it down to a more human conversation where they recognize actually you've got their best interests at heart. You're not there to kind of win points or get them into trouble. You're simply there to make sure that they go home at the end of the day.
Yeah. So for you, what are the key steps to safe working at height? I suppose you mentioned the first one, which is don't do it.
Don't. Yeah. So if it can be avoided, it should be avoided. Unfortunately, you mentioned things like events and telecoms as well as construction. There's lots of situations in all of those industries where it's almost unavoidable. You know, you in order to sort of stage something, build something, or maintain something that is obviously at height, you have to put a human being up there to do it. So I think risk assessment is a key thing, but when we deliver risk assessment, I think you've got to kind of deliver the total package. So it is about sort of thinking about setting the culture, getting those things right, helping people understand consequences. So that whole understanding the consequences of their actions is important as well. And I always say something about, you know, what's the first thing you think of when you're going to do something really dangerous? You should think of your family, you should think of the people that you care about and care for you. And that will inherently change your approach to it. You know, it helps you slow down, helps you make the right decisions, puts things into perspective, stops that sort of overriding urgency that some people have, which often leads them to do something which they shouldn't be doing, which unfortunately is bad for them and their families and everyone else. So I think the kind of the format of doing a risk assessment, following a hierarchy of control, that's probably about 20% of it. Writing rules and procedures, again, that's a very small proportion. It is important, but people just don't blindly follow rules. A large part of it, I'd say more than 50%, is really setting the right culture for change.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much for your
You're very welcome.